Wichman, president of the National Tropical Botanical Garden, also a resident of Haena, and I come from a long line of storytellers. The story I will share with you today is the journey of my wife Haole and I to help protect Haena over the past 40 years. Haena is a place rich in natural resources. It's one of the most biodiverse spots in all of the Hawaiian archipelago. This was a place where our ancestors, Ngā Kupuna Kahiko, arrived. It's been rich in cultural history ever since. The community they developed there thrived for over 1,000 years, living in harmony with the natural world around them. Haena is a wahipana, a storied place. This is the view from the bed that I grew up in, looking up to the pinnacle rock on the very tip of the mountain. This pohaku is ever vigilant, watching over Haena, and I determined that I too wanted to be like Pohaku Kane and make a difference in protecting Haena. My tutu lady, my grandmother, Juliet Rice Wichman, who also lived in Haena, she instilled in me the knowledge and values of our ancestors. Literally, the land is the chief, and we are there to serve it. She got me to begin work at the National Tropical Botanical Garden. This is my 47th year working there, and it's been an incredible career. Haole and I set forth to create Limahuli Garden and Preserve as a model based on traditional Hawaiian knowledge and values. Our kupuna understood that nature was our life support system, and so we built the Garden and Preserve based on the principles of Ahupua'a, from ridge to reef, from the top to the bottom, and out into the ocean. We developed a land management system that was modeled on the way our ancestors looked at the natural world around them. We took this proverb, Iola oi, iola mako ne. My life is dependent upon yours, your life is dependent upon mine, as really our model in caring for this special place, Haena, that it in fact would care for us.
We run all over, we wouldn't see it, we'd play over here all day and never see anybody. Go down to the end of the beach, swim ain't nobody. We'd just walk, have the whole run of this place.
Haena State Park was created in 1967 as a gateway to the Napali coast, a world-class hiking destination.
The majority of the park is covered by agricultural terraces, lo'i as we call them. They're flooded and they grow the staple crop taro, and they fed the people. And in the intervening 30 or so years from the time it was created as a park, the cultural sites were abandoned and they had been slowly covered by a forest of invasive trees.
The state recognized that they needed a gateway for people to park and a comfort stations. But as the visitors went from hundreds to thousands every day, Haena and the Napali became overrun. Our roads were congested with cars, rubbish filled our beaches, people overran the natural resources, and Haena was crying out for help.
This place is only one way in and one way out.
Haena, the North Shore of Kauai, was more or less the poster child for over-tourism.
Most photographed coastlines in the world, everybody wants to come here, and it was getting overrun.
The community responded, and in 1998 we formed the Hui Maka'ainana o Makana, dedicated to protecting the resources in Haena State Park.
All the work of our ancestors that farmed these lands was getting destroyed by Java plum trees, false kamani trees, and they were just uprooting all these walls. Like this wall, particular wall right here, right here is probably 700 to 1,000 years old. There's a whole nother layer under this. Some key members in the community decided that enough is enough. We want to get back on the land, start farming our taro, getting back farming the land, and at the same time preserving. There's some beautiful, beautiful, beautiful terraces that goes all the way, probably close to 1,000 acres, I think, if you include here and then go all the way up in the back, including Limahuli Valley. Yeah. So we just were just appalled and shocked, and the state didn't have any plans.
A group of folks from the community, lineal cultural descendants, who were pushing strong for this cultural component to be revitalized. That was when I first met these amazing people from this community who were very patient with us as archaeologists.
You know, being a product of the 60s and the 70s, you know, working with the government, you know, at that time I probably would have choked.
Our vision was guided by our kupuna, Uncle Tom and Auntie Annie, both born and raised in Hyanna. Our vision was to re-engage our community in helping to restore balance.
Uncle Tommy, though, he was digging it, he was maintaining it, telling stories of it, and working it like daily, almost until the day, you know, he left this earth. And that is a true reward.
Alan recognized our goal of removing this alien forest that had overgrown the breadbasket of our community. And as an archaeologist, he utilized the mapping of Hyanna State Park as a tool to empower the community to begin the healing and restoration. As a curator of the archaeological sites in Hyanna State Park, our community was empowered removing the vegetation and replanting kalo.
All had to be taken down by hand, yeah.
It's hard work, but we've never shied away from it. Month after month, year after year, for 20 years, our community labored, removing the forest and restoring the rock walls and the cultural sites that were there for nearly 1,000 years.
It took us probably about 8 or 10 years to get to this point. And then in the last, you know, 5 to 8 years, we've been opening up this area and opened up all that upper area. And then eventually, you know, we want to open all the way to Limahuli Stream.
These guys who were, you know, 20 years my senior, they were wielding chainsaws that were impossibly large, you know, while I was wielding a pencil, you know, and a trowel. And they felled trees so I could draw rocks. And yeah, they were among, you know, the stalwart welcoming guys who we built trust with over the years.
So we started up here, and the elevation's higher here. So this one's a little bit lower. So, you know, we're working our way. Now, we cannot open up these patches until we clear the last one, because all the water is going to go down to that last patch, right?
Sure.
So we had this giant Java plum tree. I swear the stump was this big, you know. And you know, Java plum, if you look at this lohi, you know, that lohi is about as wide as this one. The root system, all the way from one bank to the other, you know. Yeah. And so we got this stump, you know, standing about 10 feet high or 12 feet high. And hey, how are we going to get this thing out of the, you know, and I tried to ask Alan,
yeah,
you know, if I could bring up, you know, I told him, Hopto, come on, just one time, you know, just make ramps, and I'll be really careful. No. So you know, how are we going to get this stump now out of it? Somebody says, let's try pull it out, you know, and I was going, oh man, this is nuts. And, you know, we tied the rope around the top of the crotch of this stump, and then, so we lined up, and now this is now probably a group of, I think it was probably about maybe 60 of us. And I want to say, you know, maybe 1/3 were Kani, you know, and the rest Wahini and all the Keiki, you know. So, you know, there's probably about 60. You know, we lined up across this other lohi over here. And then they started doing this chant called Ekumamau.
Right.
And, you know, about pulling, yeah, about bringing logs out of the forest, right, for canoes or whatever. You know, there's this one line where, you know, pull, you know, hooky. And so they, you know, and then that thing, you know, all of a sudden there's dirt on the other side of the you know, the root ball started popping, and everybody started screaming on. And I went, you know, I guess I wasn't the only doubter, you know, and you know, just the activity of pulling a stump out of the ground. But it was more than that to me, because when people put, you know, all of our ancestors, no matter what nationality you are. All of our ancestors, we never thought twice about doing stuff like that, So, working together is where we, gotten us to this point. We still got that spirit of trying to work together,
Workday after workday, our community labored.
Every time we had a work day, we'd have to have an archaeologist here.
And while we were doing that, our community became even more overrun.
But it was being loved to death.
Can you imagine you go home, you go home and then all of a sudden there's 200-300 cars parked in front of up and down your street, people walking, 7 days a week, in and out, in front of your house. That's what was happening to this community, and nobody told you. Nobody asked you. I'll tell you, the community down here, where they were ready to drop trees on the road and stuff,
I remember they come to blows.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It became so intolerable that the state finally began a master planning process.
It took us almost 20 years to go through the process.
It's embarrassing, but it was 20 years in the making.
Their parents, and just like my uncle was going, hey, you guys gotta watch the fisheries. You don't see the biomass that we saw. We used to see what we seen in our lifetime. You're in one of the few intact Ahupua'as in the state of Hawaii. From mountain to Makai, there's very little urban disruption from the very top of the mountain to this ocean. So we're lucky, when that first raindrop hits the back of the Limahuli Valley, we know everything is pono from the very back of the valley. Got Limahuli up there. We know that, they got lo'i. Yeah. And the lo'i, settlement, when you get events up there, landslides or whatever, and then by the time it goes through here, they act as natural settlement basins, lo'i, and it goes to the ocean. It's clean, and it's called, the mixture of salt and fresh water is called muluvai, and that's where there's, the baby fish are spawning, and they'll swim up the stream, and, they'll stream up all these little rivers, all these little, wherever and there's a lot of baby fish, So that's when we decided going, hey, we better go look at our fisheries, because if you got any break in between from that Mauka to Makai, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to take care of your fisheries.
Normally people get frustrated with the length of time it takes government, but that length of time was exactly what we needed to build these bonds, right?
You're in the lo'i, or you're cleaning the walls, or you're cutting trees. You're building a relationship.
Alan Carpenter had become assistant administrator of state parks, and he was in a position to really make things happen.
The archaeological work was done. Let's establish, for the first time in the history of Hawaii state parks, an actual visitor limit, right? Aimed at protection and quality of the resources, but also the quality of the visit. But I think most importantly, the ability to welcome the local community back in who have been pushed out by this crush, right? There was never room for them.
It was ready to implode, and we were already on the process of getting the numbers down.
We were ready to unveil this thing, and boom, 2018, the skies open up.
Mother Nature stepped in and took control.
The most rain that has ever fallen anywhere in this country in 24 hours fell on the mountains of Kauai and just crushed the North Shore of Kauai with water.
50 inches of rain fell in 16 hours, a national rainfall record. The torrents of water destroyed our roads and cut our community off for 14 months. The Aina finally had a chance to rest, and our community could once again breathe.
The entry into the park was gone, right? The ford across the stream, blown out. The water line, gone. Phone line, gone. Parking lot, gone, right? We don't have a bathroom. We've got nothing. And that was just the end of the road. There were like 14 more landslides along the highway that led to the park, which is the end of the road on Kauai's North Shore. And all of a sudden, not just our park's just a tiny piece. The whole region is now cut off due to this, storm that was a disaster or an opportunity or divine intervention, whatever you want to call it.
They're cut off, totally cut off for, almost 2 years, really.
That set the stage for us fast-tracking the plan, because we basically, we had a blank slate, right? Everything just wiped clean by the waters of Kauai. But
during that time, Alan stepped forward, and within a little over a month, he was able to get the master plan approved by the Board of Land and Natural Resources.
The only way to get there after the flood was either by boat or by helicopter. We went from the west side of Kauai, Kikiola Harbor, hopped into a Zodiac with a bunch of folks, and took a 14-mile boat trip along this rugged coast, and we ended up coming into Wainiha River, which before the flood wasn't really accessible. It had a big sandbar, but the flood blew it all out, and we're slowly entering this previously inaccessible waterway, looking down, and there's a minivan in the water underneath us because all these cars have been blown out by the flood. And we come up to shore, and I'm expecting to see this heartbreak and downtrodden community, and all that I could see is just beaming smiles on these folks' faces. It had become like the hub of the community, because this is where all the supplies were coming to shore, and it was really just a very moving moment. Shakas and happiness, and they were just ecstatic. These people had, many of them, if they were young enough, had never known life on the North Shore without just a constant parade of rental cars and crushing numbers of tourists coming through their community every single day. And today there were more horses on the roads than there were cars, right? And so, I take this ride to the end of the road, and everyone's just greeting us, and, kids are playing in the street. It's just this, it's like we step backwards in time, 100 years.
Quickly, they allocated the funding needed to build a parking lot and to manage the visitors coming in.
The flood created this flood of money, right? Emergency money coming in to fix roads and parks and highways, and we were able to tap into that. And within a year or so, we essentially rebuilt the entire park, but with the master plan improvements in mind, right?
So what is this plan? Guests must make an online reservation so the visitor count is controlled and limited, and they pay a small fee. When they pass Honolulu on the thin road that goes past some one-lane bridges, they park together in a lot, register, and wait for the shuttle. The shuttle will drop them a few miles in at the visitor center, where a greeter scans their QR code. Then they're free to meander along the boardwalk and the path through the kalo fields, through the tunnel of trees to the beach and back. So peaceful, so beautiful, so Hawaii, so respectful.
When the park reopened in June of 2019, our shuttle took thousands of cars off the road and created a new revenue stream which the state is sharing with our community. This system that had been covered by a forest and cleared by our community was now thriving and healthy and feeding our community.
Look, it's 12 o'clock and there's nobody around. Yeah. We talk to people, everybody. I haven't heard one negative comment.
As a government administrator, it's probably the fastest I will ever be able to do anything, right? So rules and laws were suspended because of the emergency proclamation. As we had this plan in place, we were able to do it the right way anyway, just at private sector breakneck speed.
Wow.
Which was, quite refreshing, honestly, for a government guy.
And the main reason why we do this is to feed the community, and that's why we did our community-based subsistence fishing area.
You come in and say you're doing something as government, there's mistrust, and sometimes just, pure hatred, right?
And it's now being held up as the model of regeneration and sustainability by other communities around the state.
It did prove out. It worked. So there's always a place for locals. Visitors get a higher quality of experience with limits, capacities, and timed entry, right? And most importantly, the adjacent community is not so overwhelmed, and they don't despise tourists quite so much.
Just, the days of flying to Kauai, getting off the plane, jumping in a rental car and driving down here and driving into this park and walking is over. It's over. You've got to plan your vacation. It's happening all over the world. It's nothing new. It's not anything. It's a world thing. We love our tourists, but you got to remember, you know, it's master-servant mentality is not happening here. You know, we're a host. We're a host. We're inviting you into our house. When you come to my house, I can give you aloha, or you can kapu aloha. You can go bye-bye. Aloha is two ways, right? Hello and goodbye.
That moment of just seeing something that was always sort of a glint in everybody's eye come to fruition, right?
Couldn't know what the big deal was, yeah. You know, I mean, we're just doing what is right to do, yeah. Yeah, it's just about taking care of, that feeds us, yeah.
Aloha, and I hope our story that I've shared with you today will inspire you to take care of your community.
You know, you love someplace, you know, nothing to stop you from taking care of Malama, that place, you know. To me, it just seems so natural. The land is the ali'i, the land is the chief, and we are its servants.